What's good, people? Izzy Max here, back again for MDL pregame. This is week 8, not week 7. I keep forgetting to change that. But this is the first week where we're getting out of conference play. But as always, I'm joined by Dan. What's going on?
Not much. I'm pretty excited to see these cross-divisional matchups for the first time this season. It's always a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's. This is our last transaction. There are only 4, which is to be expected. Not many people are changing up their teams too much, but I'll go ahead and take the first one, and that is Matt dropping Mamoswine for Diggersby. At face value, this doesn't look too intriguing. Like, you're just dropping a ground type for a ground type. One with normal typing, one with an ice typing. But this kind of plays more into his playoff strategy. With this being the last transaction, he was saying that Diggersby looks better into the massive steel types that the blue division has. The red division is kind of lacking in giant steel types. But I don't know. Based on some of the matchups that he potentially could have in playoffs, I think this is a 50-50 trade. What do you think?
I would agree. Just looking at it, of the teams that are currently in playoff position in the blue division that he could match up against, I think Mamoswine has a better matchup into 2 of them, and Diggersby has a better matchup into 2 of them. So it's really split for me, but I do like Diggersby conceptually, so I'm happy that it's on a team for a playoff push.
For sure, and this was his original ground type, so he knows how to use it. He's already used it before. But yeah, at face value, this might be just a 50-50 depending on who he actually goes up against. But based on his logic, it's very sound. There are better steel types in blue than there are red. But why don't you go ahead and take this next one?
Yeah, so Charles dropped Eldegoss for Leafeon. Leafeon is a pretty decent chlorophyll attacker, but Eldegoss is very bulky and can run some stupid defensive sets. Personally, I probably like Eldegoss a little more on his comp, but I understand that he really did need some extra power, and getting some kind of Max Flare or Sunny Day up for that Leafeon could give him that sort of late game sweeper that he seems to have been missing at times this season. So again, another 50-50 one. I personally would probably have kept the Eldegoss in his situation, but I completely understand why he would swap to Leafeon. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I'm more on the line of Leafeon is better here, because Charles's team, if you look at it, is uber defensive. It is so offensively defensive, if that makes sense, that I think a late game like Sunsweeper, because you do have maybe a Max Heatran or Sunny Day on the Lipard. There's a couple of ways to set up the Sun on Charles's team, and Eldegoss is holding a defensive position that a lot of his mons already kind of hold, like the Corviknight or heck, even the Gastrodon. So I really do like the Leafeon here, just giving him a little bit more offense and a little bit more faster offense at that. So I do kind of like the Leafeon more in this one. Next up, we have Dina. This one was surprising for a lot of people, dropping Noivern for Sneasel. Noivern was actually kind of her win con in the game against Matt, and then she just ends up dropping it for Sneasel. I'm not really sure, looking at her team, what Sneasel's going to be doing, but what are your insights on this? You've played Dina, so what do you got?
I thought Noivern was really good on her team, and I still think it is, and I think it's very good value for its tier. Sneasel doesn't have obvious ways for Sneasel to abuse the things that Sneasel can abuse on her team. Maybe there are a couple like deeper things if I prep for her for playoffs, for example, that I'll find with the Sneasel. But generally, I think the utility and power that Noivern possesses has better output than what the Sneasel does. So this is another one that I'm not a huge fan of, just because I think Noivern was doing so much for her team, and I don't exactly see what the Sneasel's doing yet.
Right, and I know I was talking with Ryan. Ryan was actually afraid of Noivern because this is going to be his first out-of-conference game, and he was kind of pleased to see that she dropped it. So, yeah, but go ahead and take the last one.
Yeah, so Jess is dropping Beware for Lurantis. Lurantis gives her an interesting defensive option where you don't want to use the max moves that lower stats into a slot that Lurantis could switch next to. So there's some mind games there, and then it also has Contrary Superpower and maybe Contrary Leaf Storm. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that sounds about right.
Yep.
So it's got some decent offensive capabilities. It probably does a bit more for her team than Beware. Haven't been super impressed with Beware most of the season, so I'd call this upgrade, not necessarily to the core of her team, but something that tangentially she can do in a match or two that can give her an advantage. I think Lurantis is going to be more likely to build an advantage than Beware.
Right. Well, her first overall pick was the Kartana. She dropped it and then picked up the Stack Attacker. So she kind of had to go back and fix a lot of her typings. Then after she picked up Lopunny, she figured she just needed a grass type. So Lurantis kind of filled that slot. And Lurantis next to the Togetic could actually spell for some trouble. So I don't know. It's a grass type.
Yep.
Moving on, you can have the first one. We got Ryan and Dina.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really great matchup. This is the only matchup this week between two coaches with winning records, with Ryan and Dina both sitting at 4-2. I picked their threats, at least for Ryan, as the important thing this week. The Moltres looks like it has a generally solid matchup into everything but the Rotom on Dina's side. It matches up specifically well with the Cinderace and Articuno, I think, which have been things that she's relied on outside of that Rotom. And looking at Ryan's team, I don't think Dina wants to try to beat him fast. So I picked Runerigus as her most important thing in this matchup. I think she tries to set Trick Room because Escavalier looks like it has a really good matchup into everything but that Blaziken. But her ability to set Trick Room could potentially be hampered by this Moltres and other things, which is why the Runerigus, I think, is going to be really important to have the right defensive build. Although your selection of the Clefable next to the Runerigus also very much makes sense, but I'll let you talk about that in the NDD.
So I picked these two not so much as Mons themselves, but to signify positioning in this game. And these two Mons really just facilitate positioning for both teams. Because if Ryan gets out of position, Dina's going to win. If Dina's out of position, Ryan's going to win. And these two Mons are very just quintessential pieces in getting that correct positioning. Taking away... you can't run the safety goggles like someone who has Rage Powder redirection. So these Mons are very important, and I can see them probably both being leads for all three games, potentially. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. It's more of a positioning pick, not so much a Mon pick for me. Next. Oh, yeah. Anything else?
No, I was going to say absolutely.
Next up, we have Charles and Grant. This one is a little more awkward for me, but I actually ended up picking the Corviknight. It actually looks really, really good outside of the Ninetales, and even so, Corviknight can probably take a hit with like an Akaberry and deal relatively good damage to that Ninetales. Alternatively, I did end up picking the Azumarill, because it does look like it matches up relatively well into everything that Charles has outside of said Corviknight. It really hits everything super, super hard as long as you're fading the Gastrodon. So I do really like Azumarill in this matchup, but I think it's going to be kind of hard to get it going with how much bulk and relative speed control that Charles actually has. But speaking of speed control, I see you picked the Venusaur and the Lottie, so why don't you go ahead and talk about those?
Yeah, absolutely. Weather Ball in the Sun. And so you can give it Weather Ball, Earth Power, and Energy Ball, for example. That hits everything but Latios on that team. Like, literally everything on his team dies to those three moves on a Venusaur with a really good spread. So, I don't know. That just screams offensive presence to me, and Latios is the best check on his team to it. So, I think Grant trying to position this Venusaur effectively with his offense is going to be the most important part of this matchup, and Charles trying to slow it down with Latios is going to be his part, because I don't really think the Corviknight's as good a check to it, because even with an Akaberry, it doesn't want to take a Weather Ball or a Max Flare from a Venusaur next to a Specs Ninetales or something like that. Like, that just sounds like a lot of potential damage output on Grant's end. So that's why I picked the Venusaur and the Latios as the way to counter his Sun mode.
Yeah, for sure. One thing, the Sun mode is going to kind of fall to the Heatran. That's why I was kind of thinking Specs on the Ninetales probably wouldn't be the best choice, but if it's going to work in prep, go ahead and try it out. Prove me wrong. Next,
except for Earth Power potentially into the Heatran.
Well, yeah. Next up, it's just you. Here you go.
All right, so you are matched up against Toxic. So for Toxic's end, I picked the Colossal because if he can get that Colossal set up, and that's a really big if in this matchup, you don't have a good way to fight it. And although you can, just have Sand and Dracovish KO the Colossal turn 1, if he can figure out a way to position the Colossal late game where it's not just leading straight into Dracovish and dying to a Vicious Rend, I think it does have the opportunity to pull out a game for him, which is why I picked it. On your end, that Dracovish is going to be really important. It takes out so much of his team, specifically that Colossal, which, again, I think is going to be his big win con. So I just think it's a pretty straightforward matchup that way. He's going to try to maneuver the Colossal successfully. You're going to try to maneuver to deny the Colossal, because I don't really see a great way for him to try to break through you otherwise. And if you try to do something besides that, he could just get the Colossal off for free. So that's how I see this match shaping up. Do you have any thoughts on this match?
I've got some crazy shit in the work, and it's going to be fun.
Great.
That's literally all I got. If I say anything more, my strategy will kind of be revealed, so I have to keep that under wraps. So
Igon's going in. Got it.
I did threaten him with a Mr. Mime sweep. Next up is just going to be me talking about Dan and Dark. And for my picks, I picked Garchomp and Milotic. Garchomp just looks incredibly terrifying into everything that Dark has. Of course, you do kind of have to fade the certain Togekiss sets and maybe a Dracozolt, depending on how he wants to build it. But outside of that, there's really nothing that wants to be in on the Garchomp or can really do substantial damage to it, outside of maybe this Milotic. That's why I picked it for him. But the problem with Milotic is you have so much just random grass coverage that Milotic could have a hard time being like a defensive pivot. So this match is really awkward, more for Dark than it is for you. But if the sets are correct, I think Dark might have a chance at squeaking in some games. But this one's going to be close if Dark is doing it correctly. If not, I can see you actually sweeping this one. But what do you think?
I haven't done much in terms of prep for this match yet, but I would agree the Garchomp on paper looks positionally strong into a lot of his team. But like I said, I haven't looked too much at it yet. Arcanine potentially, but he does have that Milotic to scare it off to some extent. There are some interesting ways that I could play this set. I'm not sure which one I'm going for yet, but the Garchomp probably makes the team in most comps.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. But moving on, you can have this next one, John and Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at this matchup, John's Volcarona looks like it hits a lot of Matt's team pretty well. Especially like that Celesteela, Volcarona can hit it really hard if the rain isn't up. And John has a really good way to deny rain with Meowstic M, which has Prankster Sunny Day, I believe, which is why I almost considered picking it. But if he can get a Sunny Day up and this Volcarona, it's going to one-shot that Celesteela. And it can take on so much of Matt's team outside of that Archeops and that Pelipper. But I think for Matt, the Pelipper positioning it to always keep the rain up is going to be important. I know he ran Scarf Rain Dance against previous Prankster Sunny Day users, so that's something you might see here, just to keep the rain up slower than Prankster, but faster than a Fastmon attacking. But just generally, this matchup looks like John needs to position at Volcarona successfully to have a chance against Matt. Otherwise, that Celesteela just looks so good into the rest of his team.
For sure. This one's actually a little bit more weird than you might think just by looking at it. If Matt's going to position this Pelipper to always have the rain up, John has Credilli and Mantine, who can also kind of counter the rain. So it's really weird, but I picked Kangaskhan and Celesteela, of course. If Celesteela goes unchecked, sorry, John, it's straight up game. You really do have to have solid ways to counter this Celesteela, and I actually think the Kangaskhan can be one of them. It has a decent offensive stat, and it does get both elemental punches. So if in game 1 you see that the Celesteela is actually running Akka Berry, and you're teching like Thunder Punch or something on the Kangaskhan, maybe you change strategies to deal with the Raichu and then hit the Celesteela with your Kangaskhan instead of throwing a fire move at it. I just think the flexibility of offensive Kangaskhan can actually be really huge in this one. But yeah, if Celesteela goes unchecked, this one's going to be really, really difficult. Moving on. This is our last one. No, we got 2 more. So this one is Jess and Burst. This one's actually super interesting. And for me, I picked the 2 ground types in this one. Burst team doesn't really want to fight a solid ground type. And it looks kind of weird, but Naganadel, Urshifu, if it's a special Lando, doesn't want to be in there. Rhyperior is still weak to ground. You got Magnezone, Talonflame with rock coverage. The Lando here just looks really, really good if positioned correctly, and it can't be like Thunder Wave from the Morgrem. But alternatively, on that same note, the Rhyperior also looks really good into Jess's team. She does have a bit more of a ground weakness with her sweepers in the Stack Attacka, the Arctozolt, and the Centiskorch, I guess, but it's a Centiskorch. So I do think it's going to be kind of a battle of the ground types in this one. So it's going to be interesting to see. But tell me about the Togetic and the Urshifu. I noticed we picked the trade partners here.
Yeah, the Prodigal Son returns this week with Togetic against Burst. And I also think Togetic is going to be Jess's best answer to this Urshifu, which hits a lot of her team effectively, but it doesn't want to be on the field at the same time as Togetic redirecting its 2 stabs, even if you give it something like Iron Head. But the Urshifu, if she can, or if Burst can position around Jess's Togetic, like, it really hits that Stack Attacka, it hits the Dragonite decently, it takes out her entire Hail mode, it takes out another one of her Trick Room options in Slowbro. Like, it hits just so many things so hard, but that Togetic is going to be really key in mitigating that damage. And man, I think Togetic's going to put in a lot of work this week, and we're going to meme in the chat about the trade because of it. Like, I don't think it's the end-all be-all for this trade, but Togetic just looks so good into so much of this team this week.
Yeah, it really, really does. And not really having a solid redirector on Burst side might actually hurt. More so this week than it has before, but we'll see where this one goes. And then lastly, you got Hector and Hunter.
Yeah, absolutely. Regieleki looks like it hits everything. Like, it looks like it just hits absolutely everything except for Appleton. But even with Regieleki hitting everything, keeping the rain up, I think, is going to be important for Hunter in this matchup with the Kingdra. This Regieleki just looks like it has a big issue, but he's got to keep the rain up to protect the Metagross, which is another thing that can fight the Regieleki with some Max Quakes, because if that Charizard comes in front of the Metagross and rain is not up, and I see what you did with the Klefki, and that is also a good point. Charizard can one-shot a Max Metagross, especially if it's in the sun.
Yep.
And I have a feeling you're going to explain to me how exactly that's going to happen right now.
Yeah, it's all Klefki, kind of just denying that weather. Because with weather up, I do believe Kingdra actually outspeeds Aleki. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong. But, okay, you have rain up. You switch in, or you set the sun with Klefki, and now you're just kind of screwed. So I do think Klefki is actually really important here. I don't like Klefki, but it's very important. And then alternatively, Snorlax purely for its special bulk. Hector has a very specially offensive team. You look down and you see Aerodactyl and Flapple, and I guess Miltank. And that's really the only physical offense, like real physical offense. Of course, you have Persian. But outside of that, nothing can really take down this Snorlax, which is kind of interesting. So if Snorlax can come in correctly and it's the right set, I do believe it can potentially put in some like 3v1, 2v1 work here. So I'm interested to see what kind of Snorlax set, because I don't think we've seen a lot of Snorlax this season. So I do think this is a good match for it.
Absolutely. Positioning the Snorlax correctly, if it's a belly drum set, making sure to belly drum at the correct time, like these are going to be really key points for Hunter in this matchup, and I could definitely see the Snorlax putting in some work this week.
Yep. So what is your match of the week? And I'm going to go ahead and scroll to it because I know which one you're going to talk about.
Oh, it's Ryan and Dina.
Yeah,
like,
same.
they're both 4-2. They are both in a race to not be a wild card to try and get one of those top 3 spots. Ryan looks like he's in a little bit more of a secure position than Dina, but Dina is in a 3-way tie with tied differential between the people in 3rd and 4th. Like, there's one team is going to finish, like 6-3 and be in the wild card out of the blue division, and you don't want it to be you. So every matchup between me, Charles, and Dina is going to be really important in these cross-conference ones. But this one is the hardest one this week, it looks like, just on paper, because Ryan has the best record out of any of the opponents. So this is going to be a huge week for Dina.
Also, if either of these two are pushing for that number 1 slot, they have to come out of this one with a win. Depending on whoever loses this match is probably guaranteed out of that number 1 slot, since both me and Matt are sitting at 5-1. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the winner of this could still push the 1 slot in their division. The loser needs to hold their head up high and not fall into that wild card slot. So yeah, I think that's it. This is gonna be interesting.
I'm ready to watch these cross conference matches going. I'm part of hashtag Blue Division Supremacy. So of the 21 cross conference matchups, the conference that wins 11 of those games is the Supreme Conference. So Blue Division Supremacy, pick up your wins, guys.
Oh, okay, I got you on this one. This one is looking like, based on paper, Blue's gonna take this week, but I think Red will throw you in for some surprises. So. But anyway, that's going to do it for us. It's going to be relatively quick. We're just kind of talking about playoff things at this point, so we're not going to reveal too much. But yeah, without further ado, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.